Well, then we'll go ahead and get started here. So for today's episode is going to be a little bit different from last week's. Last week's was a little bit more factually based as we did a more of a critical analysis between the two next gen consoles. Today we want to do a little bit more of a conversational tone. The title of our podcast is the Allegedly Essential Podcast, and today we're going to talk about where that title actually comes from, as all of us here are citizens. We live in the U.S., and we're currently struggling with the coronavirus. We're just absolutely killing it. Our numbers are fantastic, the most fantastic numbers that have ever existed.
We're last,
And
which means we're
we're
first.
last or first or something like that. I don't know. Big struggle. And all of us, in some way, shape, or form, were affected by it, obviously. And specifically today, we're going to talk about how it affected our employment, as some of us were labeled as essential workers and some of us were not. And we all had different perspectives in terms of how the pandemic affected American society and how it affected us personally. So we're going to kind of share our stories and experiences with how the last couple months have gone during the COVID fun times. So that's the premise. There's one new face. We're joined here by the lovely Jamie here, my fiance. She's going to be giving us some perspective. She was working in a hospital, still is, during all of this. So she's going to be providing some perspective in terms of what it was like for her and her experiences. So, just to dive in, I suppose I'm gonna really leave it over because a vast majority of you guys work together. You work at the lovely Julasco, so I think we'll kind of let you guys take over in terms of how have things been at Jewel over the last 6 months.
Show.
Oh yeah, I was gonna write down every time people swear so I can censor it. It doesn't take me 6 hours
Right.
to censor it this time.
So in the beginning, I'll give kind of my take as I am a manager at the grocery store that we work at. In the beginning, for like 3 months, it was a bad time. Okay.
A bad time.
It was a bad time. Okay. Literally the first day, I remember it like it was yesterday. It was, what was it, like March 13th or 14th, or like smack dab center of March. I got a text from my mom saying, hey, President Trump just declared state of emergency. Not 2 hours later, the whole tri-state area was shopping at our grocery store. It was insane. And it stayed like that for probably, I want to say, a good 2 months straight. People were lined up outside the door at 6 a.m. digging for toilet paper, milk, eggs, just the bare essentials that people needed. So for like 2 to 3 months, it was just pure hectic craziness, just constantly.
Was that tough to manage? I mean, so you were the head of the department. So how did that
Right.
affect like you specifically?
So it was very stressful, and it was kind of hard to deal with. But because of the fact that a lot of the things that were making it hard were kind of out of my hands as well as my whole team's hands, there was a lot of things where like we weren't getting product, like we wouldn't get like because I run a produce department, we don't get certain like berries or certain potatoes or onions, and there was plenty of times where my tables were empty, and I can just stand there and tell customers like, I'm sorry, we didn't get it due to the whole COVID situation.
Yeah.
And it's out of our hands, and I got cussed at tons of times by customers that were pissed off. Plenty of people in my team got cussed at by angry customers because they needed their essentials or whatever they were coming in to buy. But the best that we could really do in that situation was just stand there and just tell them, I'm sorry, we don't have that that specific item. You can come back the next day or give us a call and we'll let you know if we have it. But for like three to 4 months, we couldn't guarantee any sort of product. We weren't giving rain checks out at all because we couldn't guarantee the product.
Yeah.
There was a lack of refunds. There was no rain checks. Pretty much all type of PR type shit went out the window.
Now, when it comes to the customers, they were a lot of them were very understanding, and I think it's because of the fact that a lot of, I guess, I don't know if you would call it like media outlets, um, were kind of pushing the, like thank the essential workers,
Right.
which grocery store workers were considered part of the, essential workload or workforce. Um, so it was good because some people were, very appreciative, and I got thanked plenty of times for just coming to work during, the pandemic and stuff like that. So there were good times, but there was a lot of bad times too.
Yeah.
Yeah. To put it in perspective, so like Calvin said, it was like March is when we got the official like state of emergency for it. We had not gotten strawberries consistently in until literally this last week. So that's March, April, May, June, July, and now August. So we're slowly starting to get like product in regularly, but there's still so much that we still can't control. But it was really nice though for when the media was telling like thank your grocer, thank your nurse, thank your whatever, and we were getting like pizza parties from like one of the local churches threw us a pizza party.
plenty of
Classic.
The classic
What type of
party.
reward did you get, and what kind of pizza was it?
Right.
So
Yeah.
so one thing that you two along with Joe, you guys work in produce, which is something that I mean when people are trying to hunker down in their homes, they go and they need food and things like that. So you kind of are you're extremely essential because people need to go to the store, but they're going for food. Now I want to flip it over.
Right.
Jeremy, you work in a bake shop, okay? So
Yes.
technically, like you guys sell bread, which is essential, but a large part of the things you guys sell are sort of like extra things, So how did this affect your business and bake shop?
So that's interesting because that's kind of what my thought process was when this started. I thought we were the department that's like, okay, we don't need this. Boy, was I wrong. Every single item that we could sell was bought out. The biggest problem was, like you said, bread. That was a extreme struggle bus to the point that I was squared up on multiple times by customers. The scary thing was, so obviously everybody has seen the naked paper aisles and this and that. Well, imagine the bread aisle like that.
Yeah.
Now, a bakery can make bread, right? We can make like however many loaves of bread, and that's fine. But like, there's thousands of loaves in the entire aisle, and it's empty. And somehow, corporate expected us to halt production on anything and make like 1,000 loaves of bread a day. Obviously wild claim, but we tried, and for the longest time, because where they are working with like farms and things, so like when they kind of like got hit, it's like if the farm is down, like you can't really do anything about that. But for us, our product didn't really get hit. Essentially, it was more of like we got kind of everybody in the store kind of got hit by like these load limits, where like you could only order a certain amount of product because we needed every single store needed to distribute everywhere, and this was like not just bakery. This was the entire store, every store. But as far as bakery, I would say like all of the main like party items, we stopped making trays completely. Ironically enough, people bought a lot of cakes. I guess they were stress eating, like they were like the world's ending. I need strawberry shortcake. So I mean, not wrong, definitely vibes there. But yeah, it was an interesting play because I thought we were gonna be hit a little bit harder on our business than we were, and it kind of, I mean, the business was very heavy, and then it kind of lulled after the initial like maybe 2 week craziness, and then after that it just was kind of quiet for a while, but then it just kind of naturally just picked back up because this is a different issue, but like after COVID happens, you shortly followed by the race riots and things like that, and that shoveled more business in.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was just one thing after another. Really,
it was just like compounded. Yeah.
Compounding just constantly.
Yeah, I mean that's really kind of frontline stuff there, and I mean like in terms of people like needing it. Did you have anything you wanted to add in on that, Joe, in terms of your experience, what you saw?
I did see some fights in the bread aisle. I did see that.
It
Because
got
it
a little
was,
wild sometimes.
it got
Yeah.
pretty wild, but really it was just the toll on my body.
Yeah.
Like, we were working all like 10, 11, sometimes 14 hours a day. I was working 7 days a week because I offered to come in my off days to be door guard and let a certain amount of people inside, make sure people have their masks on. Got squared up a couple times, but it was just pretty crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
The whole time that like the COVID stuff was, I think, was it last week? Either last week or this week is the first week where I haven't scheduled anyone on my like schedule working 6 days, like more than 40 hours, all through COVID, and like like when it was like the big talking point for those like 4 or 5 months, everyone on my team that was willing to work 6 days worked 48 hours a week. When because the grocery store that we work at is under a union, the maximum amount of hours you're supposed to work is 40 hours, and then it's overtime.
Yeah.
Everyone was working 6 days.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that it was so crazy.
Yeah, for me specifically, I worked like my first longest shift ever, which was 12 and a half hours. Which is insane because I had pulled like maybe like you stay an extra hour or 30 minutes, that's cool, but like just egregious overtime. And like I only left because of the physical exhaustion of my body. Like somebody looked at me and said, "You need to go home," and I'm like, "Thank you."
Right.
Yeah, one of the days that I worked, I did I came in for a 4 to 12, no 5 to 1. Stayed for a little bit, and then our store director was like, "Hey, I need you to go to another store and basically pick up another shift." And yeah, it was crazy. That was a very long day.
Well, remember, Chaz, the day that literally everything.
Oh
fell
yeah,
apart?
yeah.
So he worked an overnight because a section of my shop had to get reset. So he worked an overnight. So he went in. What was it? Midnight?
10 p.m.
10 p.m.
and then
6 a.m.
and longer because we didn't. This is before we actually knew that everything was gonna like collapse on itself.
Right. Yeah. So you stayed a little bit longer.
Yeah, and so
then, like what? It was like noon when everything started going crazy, and then like I had no one that I could call, so I was like, I'm just gonna call Chaz and see if he comes in.
Yeah.
And I called him. It would like. What I was gonna do is, if he didn't pick up the phone, I wasn't gonna call him again because he had already worked that day, and I was like, if he doesn't pick up the phone, I'm not calling him in.
Right.
But it was just so crazy, and he answered the phone, and I was like, Chaz, I go, I'm so sorry. I go, if you didn't pick up the phone, you would have been fine, but you want to come in.
Chaz, just to clarify, this is your fault, okay?
Oh, yeah,
you
it's all
pick
my
up the phone, so you lose. You better be here in 5 minutes.
that was actually his exact words because I'm in the bed, like not fully asleep. I'm just, I got the dog. We're watching some anime, and he's just like, "I'm so sorry." Like, yeah. What?
Really,
I thought
I'm so sorry.
I had thought that we had messed up because like we had to take apart the whole section, like he was saying, rebuild it, and I thought we like screwed up really bad. And he's like, "I'm so sorry, but can you come back in?" I get there. Whew.
Dude, I love that. I love the day of when John, literally, I've never seen John run. And he's more heavy set. He's kind of more of like a me and Chaz body. So like he ran upstairs at like almost full speed, and he went up to the office and he just yelled, "Ashley, we're up like 250% in the middle of March." Like it was like a couple days of him just doing that. He was just basically nutting over the numbers.
So like just one last point really for me about the whole, grocery store aspect. The only good thing, the only good thing about this whole situation is that it made all grocery stores numbers fantastic. Like, I mean, they were just through the roof because everybody was buying everything. I sold stuff that I don't think I've ever sold.
We need food.
You know, like,
Give me this
Right, they were just
Vietnamese
like-
Yeah, they
squash.
They
I got-
started coming to us for gluten-free shit, and I'm like, all right, we fucked up.
right. It was crazy. It was ridiculous. Like, there were people that were buying like caramel dips that have been sitting on the shelf for 8 months, and I'm just like, who is buying this? Why? What?
Oh God, I
really-
remember. It was one of the Wednesdays. It was me and Joe, and we literally ran out of product, all like across the whole thing. And John comes downstairs and he's like, "Why are the tables empty?" And I just literally just take him to the back. I'm like, "John, I have nothing. I
Right.
have not a single thing I can
Yeah,
put out."
Bought it all. They bought everything.
And he was like, these boxes of peanuts, just fill them. Just put them somewhere. Just do something with them." So I did.
It got
They
so
bought
busy to the
everything.
point where they trained me in literally 2 seconds to run the cash register.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
forgot that they did that.
It's just like, hey, we need you up there. Go up there. It's like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. Here's a quick tutorial, and I was like, okay.
Just-
That was the protest day, wasn't it?
I think, or was it the protest? It was one day where it was super hectic inside the store.
Yeah.
wild times. So I have a lot of questions in terms of like how like your opinions on how things went and experiences, but I kind of want to just run the table here and get opening remarks and then sort of like go there. So I want to switch it over because you guys had a big rush, months of 6-day weeks, 12-hour shifts, things like that. And then but 12-hour shifts and things like that are nothing new for Jamie. That's sort of like the regular for her. And while you guys ended up sort of being the unexpected front lines of this, to where all of a sudden everybody needed food and supplies, she was on the other front line, which was the hospitals. So in terms of what was it like in the hospitals over the last 6 months since this all started, from your experience, how did this affect you?
I feel like because we're such a small hospital, we got hit, but we didn't get hit as hard as obviously Chicago or Indy or anything. We had to open a unit for the COVID patients, but they weren't vented or anything crazy like that. They were just people who needed the negative airflow rooms because they tested positive for the droplet version, which is if I cough on you, you're gonna get it. But it didn't really. The only way it affected our staff is because I work a general med floor, so I had to float to the COVID unit at least twice a week, or to ICU to help with the vented patients. But I mean, the only thing that we ran into was the fear of running out of PPE. I came in, they called me, they're like, "You're gonna float to ICU today," and I'm like, "Okay." So I came in and I'm like, "Well, where's my N95 mask?" And they were like, "Well, what do you mean?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not gonna go take care of patients who have a deadly virus if you're not gonna provide me the proper PPE for that." So I had to stand around and wait until my manager came in to get a mask because they weren't going to give me one. They were going to send me down to take care of these patients with just a regular surgical mask, which surgical masks are technically really only good for 20 minutes. They don't do anything after wearing them for 20 minutes. So, I mean, I guess we're kind of at the point you take what you can get, but I'm not going to take care of deadly
Right.
patients without
You'd
the
be putting
proper
yourself at risk.
protection. Yeah.
So one thing too is that you were at a smaller hospital, so obviously you didn't experience. I think what you sort of described was something that all hospitals saw, but obviously big city ones like Chicago and New York was that to a much more dire sense. Did you find yourself having to work additional shifts? Did your hours increase? Did other people's hours increase?
No, our hours actually decreased because at my hospital, they closed a unit, they closed our ortho unit. So they take care of if you get a knee replacement, they closed that so the staff could go over and be the staff for the COVID unit, but with that being said, they decided that that was too hard on any one person to have to work in that unit every shift that they were scheduled. So they decided to take the whole entire hospital and put them all into a pool, like all of us, and put our dates down in a book and be like, okay, well, X, Y, and Z floated on this date, so it's their turn now to go over there. And then they would send us over to, we called it 2 West, but they would take the staff from 2 West and put them on our floor so they didn't have to work with the COVID patients.
Mhm.
But I mean, that was like the only really big thing they had. And then we had an excess amount of staff because when it first hit, obviously we had a lot of COVID patients over in that wing. It's a 20-bed unit, and we would pretty much be anywhere from 12 to 19 at all times. And then the rest of the COVID patients would be in ICU because they would be vented. But we didn't see any increase in hours. They stopped offering us. We get incentive pay. So like if they text me and they're like, hey, can you come in? We'll pay you like $20 extra an hour to come in. They stopped doing that because hospitals actually only make money off of elective surgeries, and they canceled all elective surgeries. So my hospital was making negative money. So they were kind of like, don't come to work unless you're scheduled, and we may call you off. So I mean, that was the biggest change for us.
So that's actually interesting, because I think if you would think about it, you would expect sort of like you guys to be the ones that like are always at the hospital and never get to leave. But like that,
Right.
basically like that battle didn't really happen. It was more so you guys were almost getting pushed away because the hospitals couldn't maintain their business with this whole thing going on.
We
Right.
actually had a lot of staff leave to go to New York to help out, and then we had a lot of people offer to give us FEMA training so we could go work in, when Chicago had planned on opening McCormick Place as a 3,000 bed unit. They had asked some of us if we wanted to get our FEMA license to be trained for that, to work there. I personally didn't want to do that because they wanted you to work anywhere from 6 12-hour shifts in a row to 15 12-hour shifts in a row and then be off for like 10 days. Working a 12-hour shift in a hospital is super, super draining. Like I can't like explain to you how physically hard and like mentally exhausting it is. So I couldn't imagine working like that many 12-hour shifts in a row. But some people enjoy doing that. I wouldn't personally throw myself into the thick of it like that. I wouldn't want to go to New York and wear garbage bags as gowns and have no masks and wear pop bottles for shields. I don't think that's safe for anyone.
Yeah.
And I think it's
Right.
sad that we couldn't provide that for the frontline people taking care of the people directly who have it.
Yeah, it definitely seems like that they weren't really prepared to support the staff for this. Like it seemed.
It was the same way at Jewel. Like for the first 2 or 3 months, we were just no mask, just exposed to thousands of people around us until they finally brought in, like they weren't even real. They were just cut up T-shirts for us.
Oh yeah, those.
Yeah, those things.
The thing about COVID is that like I said, a surgical mask, like I have to wear a surgical mask for almost 13 hours a day when I go to work, and I have to wear like plastic eye shields over my eyes. So before COVID started, the like state standard for wearing a surgical mask would be no more than 20 minutes because it doesn't do anything after 20 minutes. So honestly, if you're not wearing a fitted, tested N95 for yourself, you're not necessarily like, obviously you are protecting yourself from like droplets and such, but it's not the same as a truly like, every year I have to get fitted for an N95. I have to take a fit test. Like I have to like move and jump and like move my face all over the place to make sure that it's not open anywhere so that like droplets or the airflow can't get into the mask. So like those t-shirt like masks, the masks that people wear, like surgical masks, like if you wear an N95 and it's too small or like too big, like it's not doing a whole lot. Like it will protect you a little bit, but it's not actually like gonna protect you from the true virus if someone really has it and they're within 6 feet of you.
Right. And I would say that my girlfriend Lauren, her sister works as an RN at Rush Medical University in Chicago, and I will say that some of these themes that she's discussing are consistent with what she experienced. Mainly the garbage bag scenario, because she told me that, and when it first happened, and the just the severe chaos of just not only how do I do my job, but how do I make sure that I don't put myself at risk as well, because they essentially did the same thing of saying, well, just go help these patients. And she's like, well, I'm gonna make sure I'm protected first. And they're like, but we have all these patients and you need to get to them. And they're like, I don't care, I need to make sure that I am properly protected. And there was definitely that struggle. There's what she described. And she said that even still to this day, it's still like there's surges of volume. There's still like people coming in and out. Like we as a state are doing pretty good, but there's still like a lot of people that are getting this stuff, and you just gotta keep it as status quo essentially.
Yeah, so what we've noticed a lot more like in the hospital is, so I feel like eventually people will get like become like semi-immune to this. So like we're not seeing the cases aren't as bad as they were like when people were first initially like getting COVID. Just because like we're going back out into the world and people are like coming into contact with people or doing things like that. So it's not quite like, not saying it's not bad because some people die from it. Everyone reacts differently, but people are starting to become like semi-immune to the symptoms. So
Right.
it's harder even for people to realize that they have it. And then,
Would that be the same as just carriers?
yeah. Well, not even that. Like, I'm trying to think of an example. Like,
Good.
say I got it and I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it honestly.
So are you saying in terms of people who are being like kind of like becoming immune? Do you mean people who tested positive and had it and then got over it?
No, like people who come in and get it, their symptoms aren't as bad as they were like initially. Like initially people were dying left and right because your lungs, your respiratory system shuts down, like everything shuts down on you. But it's gotten to the point where like even older people are coming in and they're recovering, and I don't know if that's because like we are going out and like we're getting used to those germs again, but I don't know, I just feel like there's something going on with it not being quite as bad as it was like initially.
Do you think that we're treating them better? Do you think that like the hospital's quicker and getting to the point faster as opposed to in March where they didn't really know how to help them?
No, because there's not really any treatment for it. And like I said, every person, like seriously, every single person reacts completely differently to the virus. Like I could like be fine and have like the sniffles and the cough and not taste anything and be like, okay, I'm great. But like you could literally be like laying in bed with your oxygen saturation at like 87%, not being able to breathe.
Yeah.
Now, that's something that I wanted to bring up. Hi, I'm really late to the podcast.
Cool.
I'm Izumu. In the discussion of regarding taste, there's been people who've been bringing up whether or not, like, this is something I was pretty confused about. Is it a permanent loss, or is it strictly temporary through your motions of the disease? And people mentioned like long-term lung capacity decreases, things like that. Like, I wonder what this looks like on the other end for a lot of people. Will life be the same?
I mean, for the patients that you saw, Jamie, I mean, did any of them
For
like leave with like long?
honestly, I've never met anyone who lost, like personally, like met anyone who lost their sense of smell or taste, because to me it seems like that comes into play with like a lesser version of the virus, like almost like the people who do that come and get tested and they go home. All the people we see normally have like a more extreme version of that. They're either vented on a BiPAP or they're in a bed and can't get up because they're so sick. So maybe they can't voice that to us that they're losing their taste, nor maybe they don't care about that. I mean, I've only ever read things like about people getting it, and I guess the doctors tell them to like smell garlic every day to see if they're like regaining that like sense of smell or taste. But I don't know if it will like ever, I mean, I assume it would come back like after a while. It might not be the same. Like your taste palette might be a little bit different.
Weirdly
but-
enough, we have a bit of an expert on this topic in the Discord.
Calvin lit up immediately.
I was like, oh, we gotta talk about this.
Yeah, it's
So,
happening.
yeah, so I was born, as far as I'm concerned, I was born without a sense of smell. Therefore, it hinders my lack of, or my sense of taste. But I have no sense of smell. I don't know if I was born with it or if I got really sick as a kid, like through a flu or something, and it affected the organ that's in. It's like almost like dead center of your face. It's the olfactory bulb, and it sends it all the smell sensors or smell particles go into your nose, react to the olfactory bulb, go to your brain, come back, tell you what you're smelling. Mine doesn't work for some reason. So for the whole sense of smell issue with the COVID, I don't really know exactly how it works. I haven't really researched how it affects your smell. I know it just nullifies your sense of smell, but I don't really know how it attacks it, because it comes in through the nose. You breathe it in some way, and it has to attack the olfactory bulb. But with people being able to recover from it, and I feel like it's too early to tell whether or not it's going to have lasting effects on people that with a sense of smell, because I feel like we need to find out exactly what it's doing to your nose and to your lungs. I know the lung capacity is an issue, but I feel like
I can speak a little
I
bit
feel
to
like-
that.
part of the issue is that no one knows. Like COVID is
Right.
super
Long
unknown.
term,
Like
yeah.
I feel-
everything is unknown. Like
Right.
it's just a question mark. So they
Exactly.
don't know.
right.
Yes, so
Um,
I just sort of like doing like some quick looking. It's sort of just, and I know that I have my monitor brightness up, so you can't see my face at all. I look like a ghost.
You're very
I
radiant.
totally know. It's fine. I'm just like getting a basic
I am a
TLDR
quasar.
off this before I
Radiation
talk about
is spicier.
there you go. You fit it in. Radiation is just spicy.
Yeah.
Congratulations, it happened. So in terms
Drinking
of the
coffee.
virus, because with when school shut down, when I was teaching online, I just immediately shifted to teaching how viruses work to the kids. And so I kind of like
Mhm.
research it a little bit, and like, so the basic premise of what's going on and like the long-term effects are like simply the way a virus works is all a virus is just a little spiky ball with DNA inside of it, and you breathe it in, it goes into your lungs, and it latches on to the cells in your lungs, injects its DNA, the cells in your lungs accidentally take that DNA, produce more viruses, the viruses break out and destroy that cell and infect other cells and throughout your lungs. So what happens is during a bad infection is it's infecting cells, using them, and then breaking out of them. So it's literally damaging cells. Now in terms of like long-term effects, it depends on how bad the infection is, because cells can repair, they can reproduce, and they can handle that damage. It depends on the age of a patient. There's a reason why we see it affecting elderly more, because their ability to sort of like reproduce lung tissue and things like that is not at the same capacity as a younger person, so it can more severely affect there. But a bad infection in which they're dealing with it for like weeks and weeks, that's a lot of time of the virus reproducing and infecting healthy cells. And that causes a lot of damage. The virus also is particularly good at tricking our immune system. So when you get sick, most of the symptoms you feel are actually a result of your immune system. Like stuffy nose, sore throat, things like that. Like that's your immune system trying
Right.
to remove the virus, trying to get rid of this foreign entity. And what happens with COVID specifically is that the immune response to COVID often is sort of in a simplistic term, it overreacts. It goes to the lungs to try to affect the virus, and the virus sort of like triggers the response to be harsher, and that leads to like heavy inflammation and high tissue damage. As your immune response tries to kill the virus, it damages your lungs, and that could I got a sub. Thanks, bud. That scared the crap out of me.
Nice.
Thank you for That's up, dude.
Big,
Yeah,
big
as your immune response tries to attack the virus, it doesn't discriminate between infected cells and healthy cells, so that can lead to long-term tissue damage. If the tissue in your lungs gets too heavily damaged, you can experience sort of like you said, ew, screw you. That can affect lung
Thanks for the sub.
capacity and things going forward. So in terms of long-term effects, like we will see, but it can and definitely leave high amounts of scar tissue in your lungs, which can affect your breathing capacity later on.
And I feel like that would probably explain why people are thinking that the sense of smell or the lung capacity would be a long-term issue for people, because of the fact how you're explaining, like how viruses work is they damage the cells, and if they get into the organ that
olfactory bulb,
produces
yeah.
your sense of smell, the olfactory bulb, and it damages the olfactory bulb, and it's not going to work anymore. And that's what's going to make people not be able to smell for the rest of their lives or for a undetermined amount of time.
Yeah, it's tricky too.
I did want to say a small comment. It's unrelated. It's the first time I've seen Bob Shaw. He looks fantastic.
Thank
He's
you.
quite the looker.
So, yeah, that pretty much covers the science on that. I guess we can go ahead and transition, and I'll speak to my story as being somebody who was deemed not, well, I guess, yeah, not an essential worker. I mean, I was still working, but they sent me home. So, I mean, for those who don't know, I'm a middle school science teacher. So, we were just mid-year having a blast when this all sort of happened. So just to paint the narrative of what it was like, so the kids were very privy to this. 12-year-olds need more credit than they get. They're quite wise, and they were picking up the news on the coronavirus quite early, and they had lots of questions about it as it was happening. I specifically remember a lot of talk in February about what was going on, and to give timetable here of how the world ended. So I think it was like March 1st, maybe. It was a Monday, it was the start of a new week, and I had been getting just a ton of questions about it. So I decided I was getting ready to launch my cell structure unit. So I thought, well, a good way to introduce cells is I would talk about the virus a little bit. So I was going to do just a one-day lesson where we would talk about it, we would ask some questions, we'd read an article, and sort of analyze it and look at some data. And I did that maybe March 1st. And at that point, there were 75 cases in the United States. It was around March 1st, by the way. These are kind of rough numbers based off of my memory. But there were 75 cases in the United States, roughly. A vast majority of them were at a nursing home in Seattle, Washington. And so we watched a news report where they were interviewing people from there and sort of talking about it. And I remember just being a bit naive, but also trying to not instill panic, because I am directly dealing with children. And sort of we ended the discussion sort of talking about what they can do to keep themselves healthy and, prevent this. And, we talked a lot about washing hands, using hand sanitizer. Our school has hand sanitizer dispensers everywhere. So I was like, yeah, start using them instead of just, doing it all into your hand and throwing it at your friend like you normally do. Actually wash your hands, things like that.
Right.
Keeping your distance, you don't necessarily need to be hugging your friends all the time. Keep distance. This stuff can spread fairly easily. We talked about how, it'll affect how we breathe, and you breathe it in, and that's how you actually get it. So stop touching your face and things like that. And I sort of left it at that in terms of the fact is the world's not going to end. It's going to be okay. Do your part, and we'll be fine. Literally 2 weeks later, it's Wednesday-ish, we're having our team meeting, the kids are at gym, we're having team meeting, and all of a sudden schools around us, around Chicago, are starting to close. The charter schools and the private schools started to close, things like that. And so there was some concern, a little bit of well, what's gonna happen, blah blah. And again, the idea for me, now granted, it's only my third year, okay, but the idea of a mass public education shutdown didn't seem like a possibility in my mind. I knew that the cases were kind of surging, but it just didn't seem like something that could or was even on the table. So I was like, oh, okay, we'll see. You know, we're like 3 weeks out from spring break. We'll see what happens. And just every day, it just got scarier and scarier. And then Friday, the 13th, March 13th, was a weird day. We're going through the day. There's 9 periods in the day, and we're in 7th period. And all of a sudden, one of my team leader is going by all the classrooms, and she pulls me aside. The kids were like doing a project, so I wasn't speaking or anything. I was just walking around and conferencing. And she pulled me aside and she said that the high school district that we're a feeder school to, that they shut down for 2 weeks, and just that for me to like casually check my email every little bit because there might be some news coming. And I was like, okay, just played it off. Some kid asked me what they said, and I said, go back to coloring. And then and then 8th period comes along, and 8th period comes along, and we're in, and I'm dealing with that class. That was my more difficult class, so I was much more involved with them. And they made an announcement saying that they wanted, it was the secretary saying that they wanted our instructional coach, who was kind of like, I guess I'll say like our dean, even though it's not really his job, though he did a lot of dean-like activities. They wanted him, the nurse, and every single 8th grade teacher that was on plan period to come down to the office. And I'm just like, oh no, it's happening. And so they all get called down. And my classroom is like the last classroom before you get to the main walkway to the office. So I'm just seeing people just funneling up to the office, and I'm like, oh no. And then like kids in my class are seeing it because my classroom doesn't have doors because it's a ridiculous concept. And they're seeing all these teachers, and they just look at me like, nice. Like figuring out what's going on. And like it's
Nice.
just stop, it's fine. And then like maybe 20 minutes later, the 8th grade teachers come out, and then I have a good friend who's on the 8th grade team. He comes over. Well, I see him, and I'm like, you come here, you talk to me. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, yeah, we're closing till spring break, which was it would be 2 weeks. So they said that. Then 9th period came around, and I knew that they were going to be making an announcement. They were like drafting letters to send home to the kids. And mind you, school ends at 2:30. It's 1:45 on a Friday. So it's like, just what is going on? Don't really know. We just know that we're closing. So they're drafting a letter. Don't really have any idea of what I should do in terms of like when I'm going to see these kids again. You know, because like I'm trying to do a job, like I'm trying to teach them in the middle of a unit. We're doing a project, like, you know, what should I expect? So like 9th period comes around, I send them home with like a little bit of work, but none of my other classes got it because I didn't know that this was gonna happen. And then like they pass out the letters, and I'm getting ready to pass them out because I know as soon as I announce it, it'll just be chaos. So I like go to like my one buddy who's like the big energetic like kid in class who like can never sit still, and I'm like, come here. And I'm like, I'm gonna tell you something now that I'm about to tell them in 5 minutes, and I'm telling you now so you don't freak out. And he's just looking at me like, what is it, what's going on? And I was like, they're shutting the school down, it's gonna happen. And he just looked at me like, what? And I was like, listen, I was like, I need to talk about this, and I'm telling you now so that you don't start freaking out in 5 minutes. He's like, okay, go. And I was like, do you want to pass the letters out? He's like, yeah. So I'm like, all right, you pass these letters out. And I talked to the class, and I had like one kid, oh, he made me so mad. He like stood up, and he's like, yeah, and he like knocked something over, and I laid into him. That's my last kid I yelled at. And I told him to sit down, and like for the most part, like the kids, like they were like, all of the kids who were like kind of pains in the butts, they were thrilled. But most of the kids were not happy about it, like at all. They were super bummed about it. They were like, what are we gonna do? It's boring. Like, we want to be here. You know, so like we sent them home, like all the kids go out, and I'm like, look, it's 2 weeks. We'll go to spring break. You know, we'll come back and we'll see what's going on. You know, like it'll be okay. And so like not many of them went home with work or anything like that because we didn't know. We send them all out, and then get them on the buses, get them out, and then they held like an emergency faculty meeting after school, and we're all in the library. And basically they tell us, they're like you know, it's getting bad. You know, it's only a matter of time until somebody's relative gets it, and if a kid brings it in here, it's like you can't do it. This is probably going to go statewide, so we're just doing it now while we can. You know, we'll see what's going on. And then they had us come back the following Monday. And this was just like the weirdest thing ever. So we come back the next Monday, and the purpose of us being there was to like kind of clean up the classroom a little bit, get our personal stuff out of there so that they can do a deep cleaning. But then also they wanted us to make 2 weeks of lesson plans in case school went past spring break. So they had like an emergency plan to cover them for that week. To cover them for that week, and then they had spring break, and then these plans were for if they extended it. And it was like weird because it was like 8 o'clock. I walked in the building like normal. You know, I see Chewy, he's sleeping. You know, I've got my coffee, I've got my bag, and just the building is just silent. And like the bells are ringing in empty halls, and it's just like the most eerie thing ever. And of course, like our principal just really leaned in on this and like really just sort of like made it seem more like she came on like the thing, and just like the way she was speaking just felt like it was an emergency alert system. Like, what's it called? She's like, for today, your task is to complete 2 weeks of emergency lesson plans. You will have until 12:45 to complete these plans, and they must be like just speaking like really dry. I was like, I'm so freaked out right now. It's like, this is so weird. So like I like hurry up. I like throw 2 weeks of lesson plans together in like 4 hours. They're kind of crap, you know, and like and we'll see. And then like we go home. And all that week we go home. We had to kind of like we still had to do like a sign-in thing, to like say like what we were doing. We just did like random things. I worked on some science department stuff. And then spring break happened. That week was nothing. And then like halfway through spring break, they were like, "Yep, we're going 2 more weeks." And after that, so the 2 weeks we instituted the lesson plans we all created, and then they were like, "Okay, well after the 2 weeks, we're definitely gonna come back." That would have been April 15th. And then like 5 days before that, they were like, "Okay, listen, May 1st. So now we're tacking on 2 more weeks of this. And like I get it. Like making the commitment to close out for the remainder of the school year is a huge move, right? And what if you make that call and then COVID just goes away and then you have a canceled school year? I get it. But we had 2 weeks of completely whack lesson plans. And then we were just told 2 more weeks. And then finally, May 1st, the governor came on TV and said that all Illinois schools were closed for the remainder of the year. And then at this point, it's already May, so now it's just a month left of school. So it's like 8 weeks, but it was like in like these pieces. And the reason why that sucked is because it's like, it's hard to plan when you don't know what's coming. You know what I mean? So it's like, everything was always just a stopgap. And then this led to the fact that pretty much all the kids just got passed just because nobody really had a firm grasp of what was going on to hold any type of accountability. So like you're dealing with assignments that go nowhere. There's no progression. It's completely online. No kids are getting accommodations at all. And it's like all of these things like led to like just like 2 months of just like really crappy work. And like that sucked. And so like going into like how I felt about it, like obviously it was easy. I live like an hour away from my work, no commute, you know, just roll out of bed. I'm really good with computers, so I was able to make videos and create interactive stuff, and like it was fine for me. But like other teachers didn't have those skills, so like kids were just, they weren't getting like really any type of education. And in that regard, the whole thing sucked, man. I mean, like it was really tough. It's tough to deal with. So, you know.
Yeah, the whole situation just, I feel like for everyone the whole situation has just been terrible. I don't think I don't think that there's probably one person on this planet that is.
There's one person on the planet and he's having a phenomenal year. His name is Patrick Mahomes. But besides
Patrick Mahomes, right? But like besides that, like just dealing with the COVID, even if you're like not an essential worker or anything, it's just terrible. It's just not a good time.
I am curious for Bob Shaw and how he had to deal with it, because I would guess he probably had limited work ability as well.
So for me, I was doing work for a major corporation in Center City, Philadelphia. So I live in suburban Philadelphia region. We don't have like a Philly land terminology like you guys have Chicago land. I think we really need to work on that. I was, I'll sign the petition. I was commuting in every day on the train, and it's a pretty well trafficked route. Like, it would be to the point where people have standing room by the time you're actually getting into the center city. So what I remember was I was in work, and towards the end of the day, we start getting notifications that, okay, there's a couple cases that are in the suburban county that I'm from. And it's because one of the doctors who works in the children's hospital brought it in from abroad and then just immediately went to work and started infecting patients, children, who gave it to their parents. It was like, what? This is where this came from? Out of the children's hospital of all places? So we started having a couple cases, and out of an abundance of concern, they said, okay, we're just going to let you work from home. You can just get rolling. So I packed up my stuff, not really knowing, okay, I'm like, what am I going to do? And I was already going to be missing my train anyway, so I told my brother, I'm like, okay, let's meet up with my brother. He's in North Philly. Let's get some dinner. Let's talk about this. Let's get out. So I end up in North Philly, and I think a lot of people got the hint at that point. There was a lot less people than normal outside. By the evening, it kind of felt like you were in an apocalypse movie, which is really weird. Philadelphia is a very bustling city. You got a lot of people walking all over the place. It's a lot of good excitement, good energy. Really wasn't there. And we went to the most popular Japanese restaurant in town, and it certainly wasn't full during regular dinner hours. And this was before people had the whole social distancing and everything. People just got paranoid early, which is good. But, so, had this all happen, started working from home. Okay, that's all well and good. I'm pretty okay at that. My job is I work in technology, and all the things that I touch are cloud-oriented anyway. So it really wasn't a big deal. But then you start noticing the breakdowns, right? Like, you're on my team that I was working with is very team-oriented. Every morning, physical meeting in front of each other. It's stand-up, as we call it. So you get together. What did I do yesterday? What am I doing today? What's impeding me, right? And you have that back and forth, that physical discussion every morning. Get on the whiteboard, solve these problems, and make sure everybody can get rolling. That broke down pretty quick. Everybody just kind of progressively in the morning meetings, you get on a video call and you're like, I don't really want to be here. I woke up about 5 minutes ago, so I'm not really thinking about problems right now, which wasn't very great. And progressively, because the company I was working for also works in many other business units, we just started seeing a lot of the people who worked, especially in the skyscraper, physically were just let go. And that didn't affect me for now. A couple months go by. Okay, you have reduced hours. You just don't work Mondays anymore. Okay, so making less money per week, and I'm getting an extra day off. That's not too bad. Eventually, just out, done, laid off.
Yeah.
That was because I was a contract, and I was the latest contract. So, regardless how I was doing, which I gotta say, humble brag, was doing pretty phenomenal. I was just the newest person on the payroll, and so for that reason, they terminated my contract.
Last one hired, first one fired.
Yep. Which sucks, because love the job, love the people, but the breakdown from work from home over time is real. Before I was very apprehensive of the idea of working from home. Like, I know a lot of people at my job previous were like, oh my gosh, I love work from home. I could do this all the time. And I found I'm like, no, I don't get to actually ask questions to people. You don't have that good energy with your teammates, and it breaks down if you're remote, There's a very big difference between me walking up to your desk and be like, yo, what's up? Versus, and like asking somebody to help them, right? That's different than I have to send you a Slack message where I have to write this out polite and say, excuse me, sir, when you have a moment, can you please assist me?
Yeah.
It's a very different vibe.
Yeah, you feel really alone. Like when you're working out, like if you're stuck on something, or if you're just working on something, you want somebody to look at it. It's like, it's just you. And it's like it wears on you after a little while. It does.
You get on, you end up on an island, and requesting for help, you really feel like you are ruining someone's day, right?
Yeah.
Which is weird, because you're doing the same thing that you were doing before, but it's less convenient for you, and it's less convenient for them. So you feel like it's the biggest impediment in the world. So that was an unfortunate circumstance, if I may say so. Thankfully, this is resolved recently. Ended up getting another gig, so not the end of the world.
Yeah.
But the market, as I experienced, certainly isn't as nice to work in. You get in that place and you're just like, man, I think, I'm getting laid off. I get some unemployment. I get some time off. Let's shoot for the stars. So you start applying at like all the big companies because you're like, I don't even care anymore. I'm gonna work remotely anyway. But people are really apprehensive about these kinds of things if you're not physically meeting with them and they're an out-of-state person. So I was shooting at places in like California, Washington, Oregon, and you shoot out the requests, and people just don't want to figure out the Pennsylvania tax code. And because I'm not physically there, I can't improve my chances on that. So they're just going to go with somebody local because that's way easier and it's much less transition time once COVID's over.
Right.
So even in an industry like mine, where basically everything I touch exists remotely, being in person is really the biggest difference in the world. So I think a lot of people kind of came up on that cultural understanding, at least I did, that I way appreciate the office significantly more now.
Right.
That like before it was like, okay, commute, whatever. Now this is like, oh, this is how I'm actually going to get up and move it in my career. This is good now.
Yeah, well, there's so many just communication dynamics in a workplace that, like, in theory, seem like they can be done remotely, but not always the case. And I think, in my regard, like, obviously, teaching is something that will never be like as good as if it's in person. Like, doing it online is just a band-aid until we can fix it and go back. But like, yeah, just like the dynamics and working with the team. Like, I mean, like there were people that like I would talk to every day that I haven't talked to in months. Just because like you're not there, and it affects the whole vibe. It affects productivity, and like it makes everybody isolated. One thing I'm interested in, and I'm curious as to your guys' opinions on this, is because while working from home like has a lot of negatives, when I think about the future and I think about a company, like there are some complications in terms of like hiring distantly, but when you think about the cost of running a company when you have more people online instead of like having a full office building, is that I think for sure you're gonna see a huge boom in companies that continue to go remote even after this is all done.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I think Facebook is kind of the poster child for that, right? They came out with a plan where they said, I think it was like up to 30% around that range. They expected to take advantage of, okay, you do not have to work in, I forget the name of the town in California, Silicon Valley. You don't have to be here physically and you can go where you want. But we're scaling your pay to match, which for Facebook, that's a win-win. You don't have to pay for as much office space, and you also don't have to pay people a decent wage comparatively because you don't have to compete against other Silicon Valley salaries anymore. So I'm interested to see what the long-term effects of this are, because businesses like Facebook, for example, were in the business of they were buying land in their town to build company apartment buildings in company town squares so that they would be closer to work, because that was enticing to people, having that close commute. Like, they were willing to blow all of that money just to get them in and pay them Silicon Valley salary. Now they say, if you want to work in Indiana, you can, and we're going to pay you less. So
So I actually have someone in the chat, Slayer's Boner 420. He says,
shouts to my boy, SB420.
Shout out to Spencer. He says this is called the Menlo Park Flex.
Yeah, well, that is where Facebook's out of, is Menlo Park. So, I'm. Looks like we may have lost
Just
somebody.
keep going. It's fine.
Okay, is this related to our friend's name here? Is this how this happened?
I hope.
Anyway.
Not. Better not be.
That would be one of the most interesting flexes of all time.
He couldn't take it. Oh man, there's stories of that name.
Yeah,
Anyway,
Are.
Okay, it was. You keep going. I'll be right back though.
sure. So I don't think employment is going to. I think when people are going to have the opportunity to work back in close quarters again, they are going to do it in mass. And I think a lot of people have definitely found over time that they don't need, like they don't need this time away as they thought they did. I think it's
can
gonna be way
say
more
one thing,
appreciated.
from working in the grocery store, I noticed initially, obviously there was a huge boom of people, but after that, you just kind of saw people just like not. I work full time at the grocery store. I know who the regulars are. There were people there that aren't regulars. I see them maybe once a week. Older people, younger people, whatever they may be, just coming to hang out because technically we were the only people open.
Yeah, we were the
Yeah.
only
So
place.
it's like it was the only real escape that you can go, and especially in the beginning before masks, there wasn't really a disincentivized reason to go to the grocery store. You just went in there and you just went to hang out, maybe buy a couple items so you don't get yelled at for soliciting or loitering or whatever you're doing, and you just kind of hang out. And I noticed it like that phase. It took a while for that to go away. Like once the masks showed up, like some people like got them. Like obviously, you'll have some people that I'm gonna consider them degenerate, but that like just have a hard refusal to wear masks. And they just did not do it. And then I remember when we first barricaded the store, it was a sight to see because Stager community page, the herald that it is, felt that it was a huge need for the community to know that we were putting on blast, almost on war against Stager by putting carts up and putting cable ties through them. It was interesting.
It was when they were like starting the whole limiting the amount of people,
The limited capacity, yeah.
limited capacity in the buildings based off of the square footage that you have in your building, and to have like an actual line where people can social distance. We like used carts to build like a little barricaded area with like cable ties, and the locals were so pissed. They were so mad.
One thing that scared me, and this is like a weird different issue, but I remember it happening and I was not okay with it, and I still am not. Granted, it just like luckily it was kind of like a phase and it kind of died out. But like when we first like happened and it was still kind of like mask or no mask, it wasn't like you weren't really viewed as degenerate yet without a mask. And so you kind of were coming in there, and when we were counting people, it was like, okay, let's say you're counting 100 people. Okay, so you're letting 100 people in. They weren't counting kids, and that scared me because of the people that should be protected the most. I felt like they were the ones, and like I don't understand why we weren't counting them. Like
With COVID,
I remember,
I feel like it's not necessarily about protecting the kids because for the most part they're not really getting that sick. It's about protecting the adults because the problem is that they're carrying it to us and it's killing us but not killing them. So that's why a lot of the stores out here in Indiana weren't allowing kids under the age of 18 inside because they are carriers, and unfortunately little kids are gross. They pick their nose and they wipe it on shit because that's just what they do.
can't
right,
confirm.
so like let's say even if it's not for the protection of the kids but the protection of all, you still should be counting them because
Yes,
like you just
yeah.
said, if they're gonna come in and just
Yeah.
fart on oranges, like I mean I don't want them in the
They
store.
do.
Like
My poor oranges.
I don't want to buy slightly used oranges.
Yeah, it's true. It's a
So-
weird policy.
I can.
I
speak,
didn't know. Go ahead,
Jim.
Chiz.
Uh,
I didn't know they
I-
weren't counting kids anywhere.
So
Sorry.
yeah, about that.
Okay.
No, it played in. When I was doing the door guarding for the couple of days, the counting, I was the clicker. I was told that to not break families up, or like don't break couples up and don't break families up. So like there was a lot where our limit of the day was, I think it was like 105 was what, because it was like, because the math behind it was you take your square foot and divide it by 6 because 6 feet, and and that was how many people can go in. So I remember because like in the morning it was fine. It was just old people and like people coming in and out to like get the bread or well whatever bread they could find, and just get out. But near like the middle of the day, that's when like a lot of families would start waking up, especially because at this point school was canceled, or people were now work from home. So you would start seeing a whole lot of families come in. And I remember there was a family of like 6 people, and we were very close to our capacity. And I had a dilemma. Like, do I cut the family in half and like because it was one mom and a bunch of kids. Like, do I cut it in half or do I let the kids go? Like, what do I do? And our store director was like, just let them all go in because you can't break up the family.
Right.
So that's why eventually we stopped counting kids as part of it, is because like we realistically can't have the kids just running amok through the
Why
store.
wouldn't you just round down? Like if you were at 100 out of 105 and there was 6 people, like you just make them wait till somebody comes out.
Because then that's if you do that, then people start getting really mad because they're like, well, let me go in front of them or something like that.
Right. You start to like the fact that the general customer has to wait in line to go inside of a public grocery store pissed everyone off. It didn't matter. It didn't matter if they weren't getting split up or whatever. If there was just one person at the door, keeping them from going inside the store for any longer than they felt needed, they were pissed.
Yeah.
I feel like that definitely has to be like a thing more out by you guys, because I did not experience that. So if a family of 6 in Indiana came up to Aldi and they're like, we're going in, then they make them all stand there and wait until 6 people exit the store. And a lot of the grocery stores out here did 1 person per household rules. Like if you got a shopping cart, it was you. You were not allowed to if me and Mikey went to the store, like you're not supposed to be like both of you going to the store. It should be 1 person per household, which I think is smart. I understand maybe like I would take my mom's had 3 strokes, so she can't go to the store by herself. So I would take her. So in that sense, it was kind of annoying because they would be like, well, you're only supposed to have 1, but I'm like, well, she can't drive, so we're coming in. Like there's no like questions, but I don't think they should be letting 5 children in with a mom, like just because people are going to get mad because they have to wait in line. That's part of the reason why we're in this situation, is because we just please people because they're mad.
That was also the thing, is we actually had a giant, like huge sign outside of our door. I want to say it might still actually be there.
It came down and then it went back up.
That said like 1, like either the cart per person or 1 representative of a household. But that, like Jeremy said, when you have the local Facebook page that's like, well, they're going to war against our freedoms or some stuff like that, it's kind of like you kind of have to bend to what your major consumer base is wanting. Like even in the middle of all of this, it's like,
do you really though?
No,
I don't.
You
don't
technically really have to bend to that?
I mean,
technically,
it's
no.
down to the same thing as like, if people want to get mad about that and refuse to do X, Y, and Z, then it comes back in full circle. The store and the corporation has every right to refuse you service. So it's the same thing. They don't want to listen to the rules, and they don't need to come in. And the more people understand that, the more we will be able to cut down on cases and numbers, because like, it shouldn't matter. You shouldn't go to the grocery store with 6 kids right now. Like,
Agreed.
if any of them are old enough to sit in the car for an hour, like,
normal times, stop doing that.
Right. Well, I think the biggest issue like with that is it's probably just the area that we're in, like our grocery store.
I would say it's the area, because I mean out here, like, I mean, we're so close, we're like 30 minutes away, but people were not giving it that, they weren't thinking into it that much. They weren't like, oh, my freedom. Like, they were just like, yeah, this kind of sucks that I have to wait in line, but I'm also not going to bring my whole entire family to go to Sam's Club to go grocery shopping today, because it's not the right thing to do currently.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I'm 100% on your side. I feel like it should be one person. It should have been one person per household, no kids. You know, there should have been all these guidelines that we followed, and we do follow some of them now. Like the cashier, if somebody were to come in to the store without a mask, and they come, you know, they got past, you know, the front guy or whatever, and we, you know, they got up to the cashier, the cashiers have the right to refuse to check them out. And it's like, okay, you just came into the store and wasted 20 minutes looking for stuff, and now you're not getting anything because you're an idiot and you didn't put a mask on. Now with the mask, the only issue is that, so the Illinois state law, or not state law, but just, you know, the ordinance or whatever they want to call it, is talking about, you know, wear the mask in public places, grocery stores, you know, Best Buys, wherever. Now the companies that are privately owned are also stating this. Like Jewel Osco is stating, hey, you got to wear your mask if you're going to come into our stores. But there's like, they're not backing us up. The company is not backing us up on enforcing it. So we can sit there and tell people to, you know, put the mask on, and then they're going to sit there and fight it, because if you're already going to come in with no mask, they're going to fight anyways. And the company isn't backing us up. So like if they sit there and try and complain to the company, hey, this guy was harassing me about, you know, wearing a mask, the company's going to be like, oh, I'm sorry, here's a gift card.
Yeah.
You know, it's happened before, and it's going to continue to happen because of the fact that the company doesn't want to come out and say, well, you should have wore a mask, because then they look like the bad guy in the public eye.
Well,
You know?
the corporations they'll never do that. They'll
Right,
never,
exactly.
none of them will ever say like, oh my gosh, like you should have wore a mask. Like they don't care, because they just want to make money. So, but the issue with that people don't understand is the whole reason why states are mandating is because of the health department. So like I could go to Jewel, and if it's mandated in your town or county or whatever, I could be like, hey, I was at Jewel Osco in Chicago Heights, and X, Y, and Z amount of people didn't have a mask on, and the health department can come in and shut your store down. That's the reasoning behind this, and like a lot of the reasons why a lot of places are doing the mandated mask, because the health department has the right to shut down like any grocery store and restaurant.
Right.
Yeah, it's sort of like a way to strong arm them into embracing those policies and things like that.
Yeah.
So one sort of thing, this kind of transitioned sort of nicely into what I thought would be our closing remarks here a little bit, and that was just sort of like, so overall, right? We've all had different experiences over the past 6 months of dealing with all of this. It's not really 6, is it? But I don't care. And that's it. I'm curious in terms of just how you feel. Like how you felt about it, like how you felt working. Did you feel like that your job did a good job of like managing the risk? Because by working, you were at risk. And did you feel like that was offset enough by the movements of your company? Like, are you happy you were able to work? Or did you feel protected? Or like, what were your opinions on how your employer like handled this situation?
So, the way that Joel handled it, there are some times I'm like, ugh. But overall, I think for what we could do, I think that Joel handled it pretty well. Because it took a hot minute, but eventually we did get masks. We from the very first day of all this happening, our store director made sure we were cleaning, sanitizing, doing everything we possibly could to make sure that like our safety was ensured, as well as the guests, the customers' safety, to the extent of what it could be. So I feel like Jewel did a good thing. The other employer, because I was still at GameStop when like this stuff started. GameStop handled it freaking terribly. They
Good
still,
catch.
yeah,
you did it.
they still haven't properly handled it, because although I'm long gone from GameStop, I still have people that I talk to. They still haven't issued any type of sanitation things. They're still telling you to go buy it yourself, to my knowledge. They still don't supply masks. They don't enforce the mask mandates. They, to my knowledge, they also don't enforce limits inside the store. And for a place that has a lot of kids that shop there all the time, yikes. But yeah, no, Joel handled it pretty well though.
I would say for mine it's more of like a personal experience than a company experience. I know for mine, I was at my girlfriend Lauren was very scared of it when it first happened, and rightfully so. It's still something to be fearful of and treat properly. But it really created that gap of I couldn't see her just due to I'm consistently exposing myself every day, and she just didn't want to risk it, which is the smart move, right? And I understood that, but it didn't change the fact that it sucked. And on top of it, if you take into account like in the medical where people are getting this and their family members cannot see them, I think that fear and anxiety that it caused, it just caused a system that just kind of kept turning over on itself. And it was scary. It really was, because as a society, I don't think we've ever experienced something to this scale.
Not in our lifetime, I don't think. Not something that literally affected personal decision like this. I mean, there's been like large scale events, but not something that required as much of a behavioral change as this. I don't really think so.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, obviously, like in terms of my job, I mean, they shut it down. So like in that regard, obviously I didn't feel unsafe because I was at my own home. So that was a bit of comfort there. You know, through I remained, you know, I was still paid, so I was still on the pay. Like I wasn't worried about that. So in many ways, I felt secure in that regard. I mean, I guess I would give shout out to my school. I mean, every public school like in the country did it. So I mean, like, good job. You know, you did it too.
Yeah, right.
Right.
You fell in
But
line.
yeah, in terms of like continuing to do the job well after you made that decision, I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I work with a lot of really talented, really phenomenal people, and I know that like in many ways their hearts were in the right place, but the way that this all went down, I don't know if that necessarily translated to putting out a good product and a good service. I have sort of mixed feelings with how the teaching went after things went down. And you know, not like I said, I mean, some people would just come in at 2:40, say that they did a bunch of stuff, and then just disappear. And you know, it's like, well, I know that they didn't do any work today. Some people tried, but they didn't have the skills. And you know, when you're doing it on the fly to just teach people how to make online things and make interactive things and produce videos and stuff like that, like that's a big ask. So in terms of how it went, I felt like it went okay. I think that it could have been a little bit better. I'm hoping that the fall goes all right. I'm a little concerned. I mean, I don't have a whole lot of concrete information, and it's August 5th, so I'm a little bit worried about the fall. But you know, we'll see how it goes.
One thing I would say that would have to suck for you specifically is the fact that your entire job is about building bonds with kids, and that just got completely shattered, and there is no realm that it's going to be repaired. Like, not only are you not sure when you'll see those kids again or when you'll see any kids again.
Right.
And that really is a devastating blow. That's something that like just is going to keep you.
Yeah, I mean that
thinking on it.
definitely sucked, right? Like so speaking just like personally, so my school is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and I'm a 6th grade teacher. So my first year teaching, those kids graduated 8th grade this year, and I was pretty upset about that, because the likelihood is that I'll see my 6th graders again at some point. I won't be their teacher anymore, but I will see them. I will talk to them again. But it did suck that like the first kids I taught, like many of them I had quite a bond with. I worked with them for 3 years, and then literally they were just gone, and I will never see them again. that sucks. That does have quite an emotional toll. I was super bummed about that. It was that kind of sucked, and it's like it's hard, especially now going. I don't know if I don't think people like within like my like district or like in general are realizing how difficult it's going to be to start a school year off with new kids in a remote setting. Like teaching kids for 3 quarters and then going remote for the 4th was kind of whatever, you know. Like if I could tell them,
Yeah, you just pop cooldowns and do it,
I was
but-
like, I could tell them I'm gonna go live, and then like they know me, so they'll probably come because they know that I'll make fun of one of them or something like that, or like I'll be somewhat funny, or like I'll talk about something, or I'll talk about video games, and like so like they know me, they know my style, they know that when I'm getting mad, so they can shut up, you know, like they it works, but now I'm gonna be doing that with kids I've never met, and I
Right.
have no idea how that's gonna go. Like I don't really know exactly how I want to start it yet, because
The thing
I
that
don't
kind
know.
of sucks too with your job is not to interrupt,
No,
but
you're fine.
the disciplinary action is pretty much like 90% of your job,
Yeah.
and like well, maybe not that big, but basically discipline is a big part. We would say that, and it's hard to do that.
Yes,
Because
yeah.
it's like, you know, like how do you maintain control? It's like you can go into into your chat, and like somebody just puts the microphone up next to their butthole and farts, and you're like, that's cool, I guess. And then the entire class is laughing,
That
and
happened.
it's like you lost command. Which in a classroom you can raise your voice and show conviction, but if you do it in a Zoom call, it's like he just got loud. Like maybe they get scared, but if they've never met you in person and already have that established, I feel like they're gonna just kind of be a little anarchy.
So the comments on that in terms of like so regular teaching, in terms of the actual minutes in front of the kids, yes, classroom management and like disciplinary action is like a big part of the job. That's just in terms of the social interaction of it. In terms of the whole job, it's very minor, obviously, because it only comes into play during the execution of what was planned. So like when we do it online, it's even less because you're doing so much more without face to face that doesn't really come up. And in many ways, it's relaxing because the hardest and worst part of the job is classroom management and discipline, because like there are teachers that go into it because they really like to yell at 10-year-olds, and those
Nice.
people love it. But that's not me.
Big vibes.
That's not me. So like the fact that that part is removed when I'm teaching from home is a positive in a list of negatives. The fact that I don't really have to
Yeah.
be mean, because I never want to be, and I tell them that up front. Like whenever I have to yell or I have to write a kid up, I'm like, dude, I didn't want to do this. I didn't come today to
Right.
like write you up. I was like, you forced my hand. You know what I mean? So like when I don't have kids forcing my hand, I don't have to do that. So in that regard, it's kind of nice. But it is also tricky. And this was actually a very hilarious experience. So I'll go anecdotal here for a bit. So I've been playing games online for most of my life. And I went through an extensive World of Warcraft phase when I was in high school. Back in the days where people would be in Ventrilo servers playing WoW. And one of our degenerate activities that we would always partake in is when you would find Ventrilo information, and you would go into that Ventrilo server while they're doing something and completely destroy you, whether you're blaring
Oh,
music
yeah.
or you're just making weird noises or you're doing whatever it is, and you go in and you
Shout out to
completely ruin their night. And I did that extensively when I was in high school. So now we're teaching, and we're trying to do online calls. So my district was using Google Meet because they had the foresight to know that this was what was happening with Zoom. That was happening a lot with Zoom, where if people got the code, they could just join, and that's very weird. So at least with Google Meet, it's through our district given accounts, so it was a little bit more secure in that regard. And if anybody came from outside of the district, we could approve or deny them. But in terms of control, that was like it. Once a kid got in, there wasn't a whole lot we could do about them. We could not permanently ban kids from it. We could not permanently mute
Right.
kids. They had the ability to unmute themselves. They had the ability to rejoin things that they've been kicked out of. And they know that better than the teachers. So we were
Right.
doing some tests during like the first week of like our own lessons we were doing, and I was big on this. I was like, I really want to like figure out these live lessons, because our district was not requiring it. So not many teachers were doing them. Most teachers were like, read chapters 5 through 10 and then write me something about it. I'll talk to you next week. But because there wasn't a whole lot of expectation, so I was like, well, I want to do something. Like, I want to see them. I want to do some things. So I was experimenting with it, and I like threw it out there, and I had like a whole bunch of kids come in, and we weren't talking academically. We were just chilling, just asking them how they were, because it's been weeks since we've seen them. And I had a couple of the other teachers in there, and we were sort of just feeling it out for how it went. And like, it was iffy, because like when a kid is in their own house on their own computer at home and like their parent isn't around, they can get wild. And like they're
Well,
yeah,
that's kind of what I guess
yeah.
I was getting
and it's
at.
like
They get cray
they
cray.
get cray. Like, we had kids, and like he was just so like he was a kid that I would talk to a lot. I would talk to him every day, and he was just so excited to see all of us because he'd just been hanging out. It was just him and his like 2-month-old like baby sister, like just in the house. So like the fact that some of his friends and his teachers were on there, he was so excited. They on his like rolling office chair, he just like got up and he's like, look what I can do. And he's just jumping up and down on a rolling chair, and we're just like, oh, what happens if he falls? Like, whose fault is that? Is that our fault?
Right.
Like, I can't stop him. And I'm like, I just be like, yo, yo, Joe, get off the chair. And he'd be like, oh, like, okay. But like, what if he didn't listen? What if he hit his head on the fan? Like, is that my fault?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like this huge gray area. So I
Yes.
had that, and then like we ended the thing, and then all the teachers stayed on, and we were sort of talking about our concerns, be like, yeah, this is kind of iffy. I don't know. And then like, because the meeting existed, kids still had that code. So I'd be like talking to other teachers, and like that kid would just reappear and just come back. And so like that kid would just keep popping back up and be like, hey, Joe, go away, we're done. And he would just keep coming back. And like, I was like, and then I like stopped him, and I'm like, stay, like, wait. And I was like, how are you getting? He like exposed himself on how he was able to get back into the meeting and how he was getting around everything. And like the next day we had a faculty meeting, and like my principal was talking about it. Now I literally, and like I'm not tenured or nothing. I'm like, listen, I was like, I just have to say this piece. I was like, this is super sketchy. I was like, you need to outline responsibilities, and you need to outline discipline in these things, because it's the Wild West. I was like, these kids can do whatever they want. They could say whatever they want.
Wild
If a
West.
kid came in and just started screaming the F-bomb, I can't do anything about it. I could kick him, but he could just keep coming back. This never happened, but it could have. It absolutely
Right.
could have.
It's also there's a possibility.
Right. And I was like, you need to understand that. And then they're like, no. And I was like, listen. I was like, maybe I have some experience in this. I was like, exploiting these things, the kids are going to find it really fun. I was like, once they realize what they
Right.
can do, like, it's iffy. And, like, you need to outline exactly where the responsibility ends. And this actually happened one time where I had a meeting with some of the 5th graders coming up. And so I was talking with kids I had never met, and I wanted to introduce myself just to sort of have a little bit of foundation. And we had one kid where he was like super excited, but I guess before he got on the call, he did something, and like his dad had just found out, and his dad came in and just started swearing at the kid on camera. And we just couldn't do anything about it.
God.
And like we
Yeah, what do you
we
do?
eventually booted him out, and because he was getting yelled at, he didn't like want to come back in. And like he came back in later, but then he came back in and he like didn't have a camera on. And it was like the whole thing was like super weird. And they sent emails off to the appropriate people saying, weird thing happened, we just want to document it, putting it in your court, you know, like pursue whatever you want. But it's like, it's weird, and it's completely unprecedented, and it's like, that's the type of planning and stuff that like I need my district to be putting out. I need to know how we're protected. I need to know what our expectations are, what our responsibility is in terms of like disciplining these kids online, in a situation where we technically, like you said, don't have that much power. And it's like, it's weird, it's completely foreign.
One thing too is a different, like, that's with like the full disclosure on the disciplinary actions, and I guess discipline kind of relates to this at times, because when you actually go to school it matters, but like, how do you tackle like attendance?
But that's tricky too.
Um,
Yeah.
Because, you know, like, you expect the kid to just show up, and like, I mean, it's very difficult because like the parent has to essentially enforce it.
Mhm.
And let's just say that maybe they don't have great parents. It's not great parents can drop their kid off at school and it's your problem now type thing. But like when it's at home and they have to actually do it and they aren't the greatest.
That's the thing, and that was something that we struggled with too. I mean, like at some point we had contact with all but 2 of our. Well, I think we actually had some contact with everybody in the spring, but there were 2 kids that never actually did any work, and like one of them was because they literally had no internet connection. Like we set up for them to get a device, but they had no way at all of getting internet, and like no transportation to go to somewhere that has it. Like it wasn't possible. So like there was that. Like we had 2 kids where like we literally got nothing, and then everybody else we had some type of interaction with. But in terms of accountability, it's a huge problem. And like in the spring it was one thing, because you had 3/4 of the year of actual real like learning to base the decision to promote them to the next grade or not. But now you're starting a new year and that doesn't apply. You like if we go remote for an entire school year, you can't justify putting a kid to the next grade if they don't participate in the remote now. Like finishing off a year is one thing. If they passed all their classes and then disappeared, technically they only bombed 1 quarter, they passed. But what about now? In terms of attendance, we track it, but it's like it's tricky. Like we were responsible. We had to make calls. Like I was making phone calls to families off my own cell phone, like to try to figure out what was going on, and try to get them in. Like talk to families, see what they need. Do you need laptops? Do you need me to set up a meeting with like the principal to get you resources? Like what can we do to get you involved? But at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do, and it's important to note too that for some families, it's not necessarily about being a bad parent. Like we had kids that would like good kids who's maybe like one parent like is like working like nonstop, and then another parent is working from home, and then they have 4 siblings that are all doing school at home, and there's 1 laptop in the house. Like they're willing to like do the work, but they can't, and like that's not anybody's fault. You know what I mean? So then it's like you can't even then like you can pursue, but then you can't even go that hard because it's like, well, it's it's not their fault. And so then that got we sort of had some pushback because like higher ups were wanting us to push more and be like, you need to be calling the families more, you need to be keeping like contact, and if you go 2 days without hearing from them, like you need to call. And then like we sort of pushed back in May, and it was like, look, listen, like there's too much going on right now, like you need to stop. Like this clearly isn't a priority for them, and maybe that's for a good reason. Just because they're doing work doesn't mean that they're strategically avoiding it. There could be something else going on, and it's so hard to figure that out, because you can figure it out when you're dealing with the kid in person. You can get a vibe if the kid is just avoiding it or if the kid has something going on. But when you're dealing with just like green checks or red X's on a screen, you can't really tell. So that's something that's going to be on the responsibility of administration and district officials to figure out where they draw the line in terms of what's good enough for the kids. And like that's why I joined a bunch of committees, because like sometimes some districts want to make it to where you're supposed to be in school from 8 to 2:30, then you need to be on the computer from 8 to 2:30, and I don't think that that's fair, and I don't think that that's reasonable. So I had kids doing work at 3 a.m, and I don't care. That's fine by me, so it's like districts need to figure out what they're comfortable with, what they'll accept, and then they need to stick to it. And that is stuff that's above my pay grade, and I hope I see it coming soon in my email. I haven't really seen it yet, but I'm hoping.
So kind of to tie it all together almost. So this whole episode is essentially just we're a group of people considered to be essential workers, and like you were saying, like the district was pushing you to do all these things and try and get the parents to do certain things and just pushing you to get all these things. And on the other side, like for me, Chaz, Jeremy, and Joe, we all work at a grocery store. For that whole situation where the whole COVID stuff was going on with the the 3 to 4 months, we were all regarded as like heroes by corporate or higher ups. The second it started to kind of like dip down a little bit, they were coming in and like, well, why isn't this done? Why does this look like this? what's going on? Your numbers aren't as good as they were last quarter. Like, well,
Yeah.
everybody came and bought everything all over. Like, they can only buy so much food. Okay, they can only buy so much food. You can't be, 250,000% positive for forever. So, like, for 3 months, we were considered heroes. We were considered essential workers. And then, right after that quarter or whatever that fiscal period of time was that it ended, and then we started new numbers where we weren't doing 250% positive, we weren't really regarded as heroes anymore. And we, before we could do no wrong, now we're making mistakes and they're pointing them out, and we look like jerks because of it. So I guess that almost in my eyes, the definition of allegedly essential.
Right.
Yeah.
Are we really essential? We were essential for about 3 months, and then now that, for grocery store at least, are we really that essential? And for you, Mikey, like, we were all doing the best we could as workers working during, COVID. We were doing the best we could with the tools that were given to us.
Right.
Where do the people that are at that higher pay grade, where do they draw the line? As to how far do we want to push these heroes or essential workers, to the point where we can capitalize on what we need.
Right.
Are we really essential workers, or are we just, allegedly essential workers?
I mean, it's a big thing
There
to
it
ponder.
is, dude.
There it is, dude.
Right.
It is. I mean, it's definitely sad. Like, I feel like, yeah, it's like, how honest is any sentiment? It's like, you guys
Right.
were the heroes. Jewel Osco's like, oh man, like, thank you guys for doing all you're doing, and it's like, oh, that makes sense because you all are exploding in the profit margin. And then
Right,
it's like,
that's what it was.
As soon as that ends, then it's like, it's all gone. I kind of feel like that a little bit too. I mean, I personally so I'm home again for the fall. Well, I still have to go to the building, but the kids aren't there, so I'm still doing remote a little bit. For me personally, I didn't really I could have seen it go either way. I was fine and ready to do a hybrid model, but my district pulled back for remote. And it's like, for us in the spring, everybody's like, oh, you guys are so great, you're working so hard, adapting and doing all this stuff online. And it's like, oh man, like, I can't believe that. And then now it's like, open your school or you're losing your funding. Like, it's like
Right.
a complete 180. And
Yes, 100%.
it's a little sad.
And that's
It is a little
also
sad.
that's also with the customers too. It's like I can't even count how many of our people would come up and like do like a shoulder bump on me or something like that and be like, thank you for being here. And now those same people just this past week are like, why the beep don't you have this item? Like, allegedly essential.
Right. We were essential
I
for
feel
about
like
3
people
months.
are just over it at this point. It's the
Yeah,
same
for sure.
thing for the hospital staff. Like, we were so great. Everyone loved us. Like, we were the best thing ever. And now we're letting family members back into the building. And even from family members, we would get like all kinds of stuff, like donuts, food, like coffee, gift cards. Like, we got like
Pizza party.
stethoscopes, like
Yeah.
pizza parties, like everything from like family members, like flowers. And then like now family members just come in and throw like ever loving fits about everything again. And no
Yes.
one thinks about back
Right.
3 months ago when we were like the heroes. Like, we had to extend our people, like, they don't understand why they shouldn't sit in a hospital for 13 plus hours with their family member because it's not safe. So administration decided it would be a good idea to extend our visiting hours so people can sit for 12 hours, in the facility that holds COVID and get it and take it home because it didn't work for the family members.
I mean, at the end of the day, we all are workers and we're working for
Right.
somebody, and that somebody
Right.
wants to make some money. So,
That's what it is.
the life of a peon.
Right.
Oh man. Well, I feel like I really enjoyed this discussion. I really liked hearing
No.
Me too.
all these different perspectives.
was
and-
good.
And all this. I really have enjoyed the fact that I, for the first time in my life, have seen Bob Shaw. That's really cool. Excited about that.
Telling you, it looks fantastic.
It's a plus for everybody involved, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Appreciate you all hanging out and talking. The Allegedly Essential
Yeah.
podcast live on Wednesdays, 8 p.m. at twitch.tv/Mr. Zeddy.
Blossoms down into